dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold.
The Abracast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. And violence.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Abracast. I'm your host, John Towers, and tonight we're going to be talking about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. We're going to be actually talking about the Djinn or genies tonight. As some of you guys, longtime listeners will know, I've actually written a graphic novel called The Djinn Jihad, but I never really got around to talking about the Djinn on the show before. So tonight, I have, writer Brian, how do you pronounce it? Is it Barrott?
It's Barrott.
Barrott. Okay. I got
Yeah.
writer Brian Barrott on the line, and, we're going to be talking about his article that was recently published in, this magazine called The New Dawn. It's, the world's most unusual magazine. The article is called, Offices of the Djinn. So welcome aboard, Brian. How's it going this evening?
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Thanks for having me on. It'll be great to talk about the Djinn. Obviously, not many people understand about the Djinn because, as we have you wrote to me before, many of your readers and listeners will be thinking, why are they talking about that thing that Robin Williams showed?
Well, Barbara Eden,
okay.
right?
yeah, sort of like, why are they talking about some guy in blue? Well, let's, I was lucky enough to read your novel. Obviously, I think you pretty much nailed it, to put it bluntly.
Oh, thank
but
you.
The Djinn, realistically, the Djinn are often confused with what you call the Goethe demons. However, having researched the Djinn, having experienced them, there are three types of otter. You have the Amazonian otter, and you have the sea otter, and then you have the mild European otter. Now, the Amazonian otter is very powerful, very strong. It can eat caiman. The European otter is a little bit more, shall we say, sedate and just eats fish. In my experience, and I'm talking only subjectively, when I met the Djinn at Fez El Kota, they were very much of the Amazonian otter type. The power one felt when walking within the confines of this place was astronomical. And
Okay.
I've been an occultist for many years, and I can tell you it took me by surprise.
All right, so I'm going to pump the brakes here a little bit.
Okay.
There's a lot to unpack of, what
Okay.
you're talking about. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to study these Djinn and what you were doing in India, of all places?
Okay, right. I'll have to admit, I was a weird kid. Okay, I still haven't grown out of it. I'm almost 60, and I've still not grown out of being a weird kid. Okay, so when many people of my age were like into football and things like this, I was into reading philosophy and occultism. I did this from a very, very early age. My mother is a devout Christian, and she couldn't cope with it. And so at the age of 5, I went to live with my grandmother. So that was quite a big step. And when I was living with my grandmother, I grew up with my grandmother, and my grandmother was fantastic. She had no limits. So if I was interested in something, she would buy me the book, or she would introduce me or whatever. And I ended up meeting lots and lots and lots of people. And through this, my verbal occultism grew and grew and grew and grew. And I stayed with my grandma till I was well into my teens, and then I went home. But during this time, all I did was study works of Pappus, works of Crowley, Evi Elipus, to name a few. And so essentially what happened then was that I met somebody who had been to India, and they told me about the Djinn. And realistically, it's only until the advent of the internet that we could find any information whatsoever on the Djinn. And from then, it's amazing what happened was I told a couple of friends that I was going to do some work on the Djinn, and they said, oh, you should really meet so-and-so. And so I went to meet so-and-so, and this woman had a Djinn as a pet. So my background is philosophy, academia, and occultism, and that's obviously where the writing has come from as well. And that's literally where I got here. The weird kid is now 60. Okay. Still a weird kid if you speak to my wife, to put it bluntly.
Well, I'm a late bloomer, getting over weird kid syndrome myself. So,
okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I'd like to say good luck.
So you mentioned that you consider yourself an occultist. So, would you also consider yourself a magician or a scholar, or maybe like a mix of all three? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Now, in all modesty, it's very difficult to be modest talking about yourself. But part of being a weird kid is people come up to you and they go, "Oh, there's something different about you," and I'm thinking, "Yeah, you're right there, darling." And they would say, "No, you don't understand. You're a reincarnated Buddha." And I'm like, "Well, my grandma knew some people who we would quaintly call in English cuckoos. Nice to be with, but they were." At the time, I thought they had some, shall we say, wonderful ideas. However, anyway, and all my life, people kept on coming up to me saying, "Oh, you're a reincarnated Buddha, you're a reincarnated Buddha, you're a reincarnated Buddha." And it was not until I was in my late 50s, I went to India, and I bumped into a guru by mistake, total mistake. Yeah, because I must tell you one thing, John, is that if you go to India, you are likely to be given what they call bubblegum. And essentially what bubblegum is you go to an ashram, you learn a few things, you feel really good because you're meditating, and you go home and that you think that you've learned something about Hinduism and the and the whole meditative process. Right. However, this is unlikely, to put it bluntly. These guys keep it pretty much to them, to their chest, and they will tell you precisely what you need to know. I was lucky. I met a real guru, and I went to his ashram. And I was sat in the ashram, and there was people talking about enlightenment, etc., etc. And afterwards, I went up and spoke to him, and I said, "Why are they talking about enlightenment when there's 2 enlightened people in this ashram?" And he looked at me and he said, "Who's the second one?" I said, "It's the woman." And he said, "Yes." He said, "We need to talk." And since then, we've been great friends. And he's introduced me to parts of, shall we say, Hinduism, which ordinarily people won't meet. However, that's nothing. I hope you have your psychological seatbelt on, because this one is a good one. I belong to a magical organization. I won't tell you the name of the organization because essentially I like my stomach just the way it is. Okay?
Yeah.
To put it bluntly, but you know, if you're in the know, you know what organization I'm talking about. Yeah. Now, when I was in the organization there, I'm still connected to it, even though I'm in the Ukraine. I met somebody who, shall we say, you've written about in your magazine.
Okay.
You know him as Enoch. I know him as Hermes Trismegistus.
Okay.
And I met him. He's still alive. He's still knocking around. That one was interesting.
Okay,
because,
so... oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because I didn't know I'd met him until a friend of mine pointed out to me all the things that I should have noticed. And I didn't notice anything because literally when I met this person, I was so in awe about how much they knew and how centered they were as people that I couldn't even notice who he was. And it was only when I went away that this then person started asking me questions, and I looked at him and my jaw dropped and I said, "Oh my God, that was him, wasn't it?" He says, "Yes." There you go. So if you say about magician, yes, I've been a practicing magician probably before birth. I would say that I'm very much the middle pillar. I don't go to the left or I go to the right. I prefer the middle pillar. And I prefer, if you like, sharing love and spreading love and spreading knowledge. You know, and I think that's really the destination of all magicians, is to allow other people to become magicians so they can control their own lives. Do you agree?
It seems to me that, well, first of all, that's a great place, you know, for you to identify with being. And it seems to me, you know, like, alchemy, you know, even like Crowley says that the true meaning of magic is to unite opposites. So I imagine it would be hard to do that if you were, you know, on one side or the other. You know, being in the middle seems like a natural place, you know, like the temperance, you know, is a position of temperance. Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, thing is, you know, I'm lucky because I know very, very black magicians, and I know supremely sort of even people with high Christian ideals. And people say, well, how can you know people with high Christian ideals? And I always quote the Gospel of St. Thomas: if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you.
Yeah, it's a pretty nihilistic idea.
Yeah, so, you know, it says it all, really.
Yeah, so, okay, all right, so you're in India. Tell me, I'm not even going to try to butcher the name of this place because, you know, I just don't know how to pronounce it, but tell me about this place that you went. It seems like some kind of compound or something.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, Fezol Kota. No, sorry, Ferez Shah Kolta, yeah?
Yeah.
Now, essentially, Ferez Shah Kolta is in India, and it's luckily it's next to a cricket ground. I say luckily because I wanted to go, and my wife said, "Oh yeah, she wanted to go with me," and we ordered a taxi, and we said Ferez Shah Kolta, and they said, "Oh, there's no cricket on today." I said, "Okay, no problem." We want to go to the other Ferez Shah Kolta. And they looked at us and said, we know a better park. And I said, well, no, we really want to go to Feres Shalkota. And after about, I would say 10 minutes of them telling us that there was better parks, they decided to take us. And as we were driving along through the back streets of India and enjoying the smells and enjoying the chaos, the machine died. Boof. And I looked at my wife and I said, this is probably not a good sign. And she said, look, it's India, Indian quality, everything breaks down. And I said, okay, Indian quality, everything breaks down. You're right. So he was the boss. The boss put his hand out and pulled up one of his taxis going the other way. The guy swung round the street, all big smiles, shook his hand, great to see you, etc., etc. Oh, wouldn't you take these people to Feres Shalkota? Well, I think you'd have been better off asking him for some kind of romantic relationship, because literally he just stood there. And then they started arguing, and it was getting very, very it was almost violent. And eventually the guy got into the chug-chug, didn't even look at us, and drove us to Feres Shalkota. But halfway there, inexplicably, the damn thing stopped. And when it stopped, this little child came up to us, dressed as a Djinn, in the middle of Delhi, which is like being in the middle of New York, it's a big city, smiled at us, and we smiled back, and then the machine started again, and we went to Feres Shalkota. So there was two very, very strange things before we even got there,
Yeah.
Very, yeah. So we went into the park. It's just innocuous looking. It's just a big, big green park. However, before we went in, we had to pay. And while I was paying, now to explain it to you, John, imagine a garden shed type building in a massive car park. Yeah, it's not really a massive car park. It's for hundreds of people that go there on a Thursday. And so, but we were not there on a Thursday. We were there on a Sunday because I wanted to be able to sort of see and digest the place. And this guy came up to me, young guy. He says, are you going in there? I says, yeah. He says, do you want to see the Djinn? I said, well, yeah, it'd be interesting. And he says, oh, yeah. I said, will you be in there? And he says, yeah, I'll see you in there. And I turned round to pay the ticket. He was behind me. And then I turned round and he was gone. And I'm thinking, my goodness, he's either the best runner that I know or something. So I just ignored it. I thought he could have gone somewhere. It could have taken me longer to buy the ticket than what I actually bought the ticket. So then we went into the park. And as we were going into the park, these very, shall we say, dubious park attendants came up to us. Would you like to go to the part of the park which is not open to the public? A resounding no. No. I am not as brave as you, John. So I said, no, it's okay. Anyway, so we walked into the park, and as we were in the park, they were chanting the Muslim call to prayer. And it was really haunting. You've got this call to prayer coming from these old, rickety, smoked buildings, going over this lush green lawn, and we were walking towards it. And I said, oh, they're doing call to prayer. And this Indian chap who was in earshot said, oh, no, they are calling the Djinn. I thought, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So anyway, so we arrived at Fez, at the place where the Djinn are, and before I walked in, I thought, I wonder what I will feel. Yeah, because obviously I don't know what I'm going to feel. I've got no idea. I've no preconceived ideas. I know that I've got to keep my mind positive and I've got to keep myself from being distracted. That's about all. But when I walked in, the feeling of peace was astronomical. Yeah, it was like
Interesting.
No. It was like walking into a church, but with incredible peace. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect this. I didn't expect this on any level to feel in so much peace. Ironically, there are thousands of wild animals there, thousands, kites, rats, everything. And they run up to you like pets. Yeah. Now, I don't care, what anybody says. I've never seen a kite come up to anybody like a pet. And then we started walking round, and it's all dungeons, and there are dark fires burning. Yeah?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question real quick. So historically, what was this place? Because the pictures that accompany your article they're fascinating pictures, but it's hard for me to understand. Is it like a fortress or?
Yeah. It was a big, massive fortress, which has been burnt down and destroyed so many times. Interestingly, a few times were physically, and other times they said with the Djinn.
Okay, so there's like legends about the Djinn being at this place, and that's why you found yourself there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first person to start worshipping him there was a faker called Ladu Shah, who started living in the ruins round about the 1970s. Yeah, because realistically, nobody in their right mind wants to live with Djinn, but he did, and. Sort of like he then started worshipping the Djinn. They started granting him wishes and his followers wishes, and from then it's grown into literally. If you go on a Thursday, which is the day of the Djinn, there's thousands and thousands of people. And obviously they go there for one thing. They go there to ask for wishes from the Djinn.
So this is new to me. As much research as I did and everything for my book, I never once associated India with these, with the idea of these Djinn. So, perhaps I'm a little out of my depth, but is it common for this in India?
Oh God, it's very It's, the Djinn. Yes, you're completely right. They are from Arabia, but they are endemic to the Asian culture. Their name changes, but essentially it's still the Djinn. And as one of the necromancers told me, in no uncertain terms, he said to me, "Forget your God. There's only one thing, and that is the Djinn."
Oh my God.
That's what he told me, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So, this is a good place, I guess, to talk about the, what are the Djinn and kind of where they originate from.
Well, you Djinn originally, based on Arabic law and Quranic tradition, the ancient race of the Djinn originates from the Arabian country of Oman, where they live in the highest mountain ranges in the eastern Arabian Peninsula. There's a village called Hajar, and this is to be believed where the Djinn enter our world through. Yeah. However, the Djinn are not. They're not what you think they are, because they really gravitate towards bathrooms, dunghill, garbage dumps, and graveyards.
A bunch of places humans aren't. It's a bunch of places humans aren't at.
Yeah, and the thing is because they love filth. Allegedly, they love filth. quite often the necromancers will use the Quran. You can see this on YouTube, and they will bind the jinn to the Quran, and to make sure it's powerful, they then throw the Quran in silage. And after it's been there for, I think it's for something like 21 days, they then take the Quran out, clean it, dry it, and then either sell it or give it to somebody as a gift.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like it's a very strange world. It's a world that sort of I don't really want anything to do with, but the thing is that if you get something like a Madrid is a very powerful jinn, or you get the Ifrit, the only way to get rid of it is to give it to somebody else. And so what they do is they give some tourist or somebody who is interested in the jinn, they'll say, "Oh, here, have this Quran, it has a jinn in it," and the people take it. And of course they don't understand that when they take it, they really are taking something quite bad with them. You can find on YouTube, if you put YouTube in and put jinn, there are many YouTube channels where people are pleading to put the name of people that they don't like, so the Ifrits can go and kill them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's serious stuff. It's not a joke, you know?
Yeah, so you're talking about Ifrits and so forth. So how many types of jinn are there, or if you could just talk a little bit about a few of the types, you know?
Well, the interesting thing about the jinn is, of course, if you know anybody who is left-handed, do you know anybody who's left-handed?
Well, interestingly enough, I was born left-handed, but
oh my goodness!
But listen, my dad was raised in a Catholic school, and he didn't want me to be left-handed, so he fucking tied my hand to my leg and forced me to use my right hand. So now, my left hand is totally useless. It's basically like a flipper, I can't do anything with it. So when I read that in your article, I was like, oh, I wonder what he's going to think about that shit. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is whoever, they believe in the Quran, whoever eats with his left hand, Satan eats with him, and whoever drinks with his left hand, Satan drinks with him, and that's one of the hadiths. So this is where it comes from, because it's a direct relationship with the jinn, so to speak. But the thing is there are so many jinn. There are sort of we have the Madrid, we have the Ifrit, we have the Djinn, we have the Ghoul, we have the Shaitans, we have the Hinds, we have the Nahshas, we have the Squid, the Silat, and others. There are literally hundreds of them, seriously.
Yeah, and they differ wildly, right? Sometimes they're just kind of deformed looking people, and then sometimes you hear these kind of the idea that I went with was these made of smokeless fire, which I thought was very fascinating. So there's a spectrum, right? They're not just easily categorized.
No, not at all. The ones that Hollywood thrusts down our throats are one of the most dangerous, and they are the Madrids, and they are kept in bottles because essentially they are smokeless beings, and they go into the bottle and they are trapped in the bottle. But the bottle is a misnomer, because it's not really bottle they're in. They're in a brass container, but it's not brass that we understand. It's brass which has mercury in it, because it's only brass and mercury that can contain the jinn. And so, this is, so when they talk about removing the stopper and finding the genie, this is really sort of folklore. What they're really in is they are very, the thing is sealed and they're within the brass container. So,
Yeah.
that's where it comes from.
Hey, last month I made an appearance on a couple of different podcasts, so I want to give a shout out to them. Women Behind the Veil. I was their first male guest host on there last month. It was a great thing. They do a show that's all about kick-ass women in history, and they get into historical females and females of the occult and females females of the occult. They did a great episode on Kali and the Black Madonna. I learned some stuff from them, so it was fun. We talked all about Boudica and Boudicca's revolt against the Roman Empire. So yeah, that's interesting. So go check them out. And then I was also on Magic and Mediums. We were on there. She asked me to come on to talk about ceremonial magic. So that was interesting. She does a podcast that's all about all different forms of magic and psychic abilities and all that stuff. So I had a lot of fun going on there and talking about ceremonial magic with her. So you can find both of those podcasts wherever you find your podcasts. I'm sure you'll be able to locate them. While I have you, don't forget to go to subscribestar.com. For exclusive audio content. There's 14 exclusive episodes you can only find on Subscribestar right now. Don't forget to hit up abercast.com. There's a bunch of great stuff, including a shop. We're now going to be selling vessels of the art, which are these big mason jars with the logo on them, with the Abercast logo on them. So check that out. Check out our Facebook page, our YouTube. And don't forget this month, the American Sermon is turning into the Sermon of the Wolf. We're doing a great 6-part deep dive into lycanthropy and werewolfism over there. So if you're interested in that shit, I ask you to go check it out. Thank you guys. So, we've talked at length about the Goetia on the podcast. We've talked all about all of the Solomonic books, and I'm curious to know how, because you kind of mentioned it before, how it's kind of like a misunderstood or misnomer, but in some translations of those books of Solomon, they flip from Djinn or genies to demons and angels and this sort of thing. So, and then it kind of goes into it because in the Lesser Key of Solomon, they talk about, the vessel of the art and the rings and stuff that you have to bind these entities, whichever they are, I suppose, to these objects. And you kind of mentioned like binding it to a book or like the Quran before. So, what are your thoughts on that? Are they interchangeable, or the one or the other, or kind of, what do you think?
Well, realistically, it goes back to the original records. Now, how the original records were written, they were written by monk clerics who really couldn't understand Latin per se. So they were copying, yeah? So, of course, they were copying from, the same way if you draw a zero, you then copy a zero, but it gets more complicated. They were set in the little corals, copying all this material. And of course, over the months and years, you inherit mistakes. So essentially it happens with religious Christian material, and it also happens when magic material pulls from, if you like, Gnostic texts, that you end up with corruptions not from the original text, but the way that they are copied. And quite often when you find that the text will swap and change and it can't make its mind up, there's very little supernatural behind it. But what there is more the fact that you have some poor guy sat in a cell writing for sort of 14 hours, and eventually he either loses concentration or he just can't copy anymore, but they're still producing this work. Yeah, so maybe that's where a lot of your problems come from.
Yeah, or maybe he just doesn't understand the context of what he's translating.
Absolutely, yeah, you're 100%. Yeah, so a friend of mine is a professor of a Greek professor of the Greek language, and it's really interesting talking to her because obviously you learn quite a lot. And one of the big things that I learned is there's no word for Easter in Greek. However, the closest word to Easter is suffering.
Oh,
hence, this is why they talk about suffering in Easter, not because there's suffering in Easter. It's just that the nearest word in Greek is suffering. This is why it's really very, very important. Because I was listening to a lady that you had on, and she was absolutely correct. It's very important to try and get to as near to the original Goetas that you can possibly get to. Yeah, seriously.
Oh, yeah, that was with Magic and Mediums.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, she was on the nail. Literally, I know some extremely powerful magicians, and they're all saying the same thing. That the closer you get to the well, the more likely you are to sort of find, the pure water. Was it Talisman McKnight was saying that on YouTube that only last week, because quite a lot of the texts, remember, they've been taken from Latin, and then they've been made into English, and then of course somebody has then said, no, this is wrong, and they put their own thing in.
This is the reason I discount the majority of like this new age kind of bullshit, like from the 70s on to probably today, is because, a lot of it is just wrapped up in people's own like tech takes on it. Like give me something written by, A.E. Waite or something like that, you gotta go, like, you gotta kind of go back in time to find like the oldest version of it. Is because of the reason that you're just talking about, like, these people that are interpreting this stuff, like, are dubious at best. Questionable, whether they understand what they're reading in the proper context and all this other kind of stuff. And I guess it's kind of like I'm on my soapbox about it because I've been talking about it a little bit on the podcast lately. So, yeah.
No, please, John, because get on your soapbox, because you're dealing with people's mental health. So if they are not prepared mentally and physically for what they are about to do, there's only one prisoner here, and that's themselves,
Yeah. Yep. I agree. And
it's highly dangerous. It's highly dangerous. Seriously.
I just did a interview with, a guy who's writing this book about magic as psychology, and it's a fascinating kind of topic to get into, but you're right. Like, you're dealing with mental health, however you wind up looking at these things, whether it's dangerous to your psyche or you're not using it to heal yourself or fulfill whatever need that you have, I don't know. So I'm going to step down for my
No,
I'm pretty revved up about it.
No, absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, remember, I'm almost 60 and I've been doing this since 5 years of age. What you're talking is solid sense. And not only me, I've talked to some very, very high magicians, people who ordinarily people wouldn't meet. And they all say the same things. They're all worried that people are getting these so-called translations, and realistically they're just garbage. And regardless if you think of it as magic or psychology, it's still your brain and your body that's taking the impact on this.
Yeah, and
I agree with you.
I mean, yeah, your experience and your worldview is affected by these things that you're doing. So okay, getting back into these Djinn situations. So another thing that we talk about on the show constantly is Islam. And,
Yeah.
So I'd like for you to talk about the conjunction of this Djinn, these Djinn and Islam. This is directly led to the idea for my graphic novel, The Djinn Jihad. So I was wondering if you had thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, it's very interesting about the Djinn connection. Now, there's two ways to look at this Djinn connection. In my opinion, the Mohammedan religion is very difficult. It's a religion of do's and don'ts, and the payback can be quite severe. Now, having a Djinn to blame helps, so to speak. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. But if we go further, there are publications written in Arabic that teach you how to control the Djinn. When I was in the offices of the Djinn, there was all Muslim binding prayers all the way around the walls. So I went to see a Muslim Sufi. She was a woman, which is very unusual here in the Ukraine. And I spoke to her about the Djinn. And I said, what can you tell me about the Djinn and, the connection with Mohammedanism? And she's just said to me, the connection is there, if you use the prayers, etc., then essentially, you will get the Djinn. And I said, do you work with Djinn? And she said, no. I said, so how do you know? She says, I have one as a pet. I said, why do you have one as a pet? She says, well, it's my canary in the coal mine, so to speak. I said, why is that? She says, because when I do not believe strong enough, it will attack me.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, what's the Djinn like? And she said, I'm surprised it's not been here. She said, you must be quite strong. I said, look, I don't really get involved with your Djinn, Anyway, while we were there, when I was talking to her, it started to get irate and it started rattling cupboards and moving chairs and stuff like this, and I said, have you physically seen it? And she says, yes, it's a dog with reverse legs and sort of bright red eyes.
Oh my God.
And I said, you're not frightened of it? She says, no. She says, she's not frightened of it. It's friendly towards us. And it's respectful of me because I won't ask it for anything. And therefore it protects me. And in her house, there is a massive binding spell. Literally, I would say it's about a yard or a meter square controlling this thing. We're not talking fantasy here. We're talking, I went to see a Djinn master and I said to him, prove to me you can get the Djinn. And he said, okay. And he said, right. He said it stood outside the door and he opened the door and I couldn't see anything. And he got his phone out and took a picture. And then, he said to the Djinn, go away. And he showed me the picture and there it was, the Djinn on his phone.
Oh, wow.
Maybe we should speak about this because I want people to understand the difference between some lunatic on YouTube and somebody who can do it. Okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about that. Yeah, right. So I was watching this thing on YouTube, John. This so-called magician, and he sat there and he says, "Today I'm going to call a Djinn," and I'm like, "Good for you." And he's coming out with the garbage, yeah. And he's got a candle in front of him. And he says, if there's a Djinn in the room, can you please put out the candle? And I'm thinking, right, yeah, that's going to be challenging for a Djinn. Yeah. No, please put out the candle. Please put out the candle. I beg you to put out the candle. No, I followed this thing to the letter. The Djinn didn't turn up. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is all crap. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. I went to see a Djinn master, yeah? First thing you have to do before you see a Djinn master is they have a chain hanging from their door and you have to hold the chain. It's a special chain. It's made out of a kind of iron alloy if it doesn't burn you, you can enter his temple, so to speak. I held it, and it didn't burn me, which was really good. And then I sat down with him, and literally was sat there, and he was burning incense, and so he said, "Do you want to see a Djinn?" I says, "Well, I said it's up to you." I said, I understand they're quite strange, etc., etc. My voice went echoey. Time froze. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the smoke in front of me formed a face.
Ooh.
It was like watching everything stood still. Yeah. Incredible. Okay. And then he just sort of clicked and everything went back to normal, and the smoke just carried on.
Wow.
Going out. Seriously. Yeah.
That's great. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I was there, I've never seen anything like that done before, and there was no ritualism. He just said a few words from the Quran, and and this is what happened. It was
wow.
It was off the clock. It's sort of like, I just thought, I need to sort of think about this, because these guys literally, they're that close to it, to put it bluntly.
So let's talk for a minute about free will, because in the research and stuff that I did for my book, I found so like the way it is humans were made out of clay. Adam and Eve, or, mankind or whatever, was made out of clay, and then God breathed life into them. And ultimately they had free will. Like, that was the whole point of the story, I suppose. And, these old stories about the Djinn, they're made out of this smokeless fire that we talked about earlier, and they have free will. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's two ways to look at the Djinn, and one of the more interesting ways is to say, look at what we sort of call the forms from Plato, yeah, and it's also what we're looking at is we're looking at what Plato was saying was that there is a perfect form of everything. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially that perfect form is a reflection that we are. Yeah. However, it gets more complicated than that, because essentially,
is this the parable of the cave? Is that what you're talking about?
No, the forms are a little bit more, should we say, a little bit more confusing than that.
Okay.
It's let me try and explain it to you. Sort of like the theory of the forms is a philosophical theory. It's a concept attributed to Plato that the physical world is not true. Yeah, is that our world is a reflection. So this sort of thing about the world being reflected is not a new idea. Plato is talking about this, sort of 4,000 years before Christ. And he's and the thing is that it was then taken up even further by the shadow self in Jungian psychology. The id, or the shadow aspect, the archetype. It refers to an unconscious part of our personality, which the conscious ego does not identify with. So there's the other side of the coin, that the Djinn is actually us.
I gotcha. All right. Okay, I'm on your page now.
Yeah, I hope that's not too confusing for you, but literally, I'm on board with that, because I'm thinking, I've seen, because they describe the Djinn as free will, they describe the Djinn as Catholic, Jewish, etc., etc., etc. Now, if they are creatures that live in another dimension, you would presume they wouldn't be into the same ideologies as ourselves, where if you read the Quranic material, they are into the same ideologies as ourselves. So the only conclusion I can come up with is that they are, if you like, projections from within us.
Okay.
so to speak. I don't know what you think to that.
Well, well, the idea of the shadow self is like everywhere, like, it's everywhere, and like trying to deal with it, I think, explains a lot of the human condition in itself. But I got tied up on this idea, like, okay, so angels were created, they don't have free will, like this, this God has angels that just kind of float around his throne, yelling and singing about how great he is all day long. Like that's a lunatic to me. And then humans have free will, and then Djinn have, like I said, in my research, the idea that Djinn have this free will, but in like every prominent story, they are enslaved. And to me, that idea is quite fascinating, and I guess at some level it kind of speaks to what you're talking about, where it's like, you're kind of imprisoned by your shadow self. Maybe that's a little too wishy-washy. I'm not exactly sure, but what are your thoughts on like, Aladdin and Solomon and all, like these stories, and how they always seem to be enslaved or trapped or bound to something?
Yeah, but the thing is about Solomon, if you research Solomon, now in the story, God gives him power over the Djinn. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, and he does that he does it in a form of a ring, and the Djinn in it steals the ring, throws it in the sea, but a fish swallows it, the ring, and then comes back, and the ring comes back. So. There is the metaphors in there are quite deep. Yeah, I can tell you from personal experience, they are bound with Quranic verses. Yeah. Whether that's enslaved is a different thing. The fact you've got a man in handcuffs doesn't mean to say that you have his will.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So that's I guess that's my fault for using that kind of terminology. No,
not at all, because it's used all the time. They talk about slavery. If you read all the accounts, and you will be my slave until I let you go, etc., etc. But realistically, if we're talking about the Quranic accounts, we're talking about binding. Yeah.
Well, I guess
which is
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no. We're talking about binding, so it's a different thing. Sort of. I think the only people who are really slaves to Djinn are the humans, to put it bluntly. Because the first thing they ask you is, do you want 3 wishes?
Right.
Yeah. And as Genghis Khan says, true power can only be taken.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just fascinated with the idea that, these texts go out of their way to say that they have free will, but like all their stories are about limited freedom for them. Like whether you call it slavery or entrapment or, just having a dude in handcuffs is like, so I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. It
is interesting. They all say it, but having experienced them, I get the impression, that they're very much sort of, if you like, bound, and they have no choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you speak to Djinn masters, it's sort of, whenever they lose power on them, it's never messy. It's always messy. It's never smooth. So
right.
I think that's the other side of the coin.
Yeah, it's like
it's a power thing.
The power dynamic in the story, I guess, is interesting to me. So, how does this study of Djinn, how is it affected your life negatively or positively, or do you have any lessons to share from your studies?
I think it's like anything else. I think the thing to learn from the Djinn is all desire is sin, so to speak. Yeah. I'm not trying to sound Christian, but when people have control over you, or a supernatural entity has control over you, it's always through desire. The Djinn, they operate in a world of desire. And of course, when we control our desire, we control our inner self, so to speak. And when we control our inner self, we control us. We are no longer desiring. If we sort of, there's a really brilliant book you can read by Siri Nisargadatta Maharaja. It's called I Am That. And essentially, really, he's talking about the state of the magician where you are of no mind and you are in tune with the universe. And essentially, in that state, nothing can really control you. And I think that's the thing that I learned from it, was that before you do anything physically or metaphysically, one has to be in the state which he describes as I am that. I think if you take anything else into that, then essentially you're in the realm of desire, and you're either convincing yourself that you're doing the right thing, or someone's convincing you that you're doing the right thing, where realistically you should be doing the right thing.
Wow, it's like be in the moment. It's like a namaste kind of thing. Situation.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like a cautionary tale for like stoicism or something. That's pretty interesting. I never really thought of it, the wish granting aspect of it, and kind of the metaphors that can be drawn out of that. I think that's very insightful.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you read Solomon, Solomon doesn't wish them to do anything.
No, he commands them.
He commands them. There's a slight difference there, yeah. But,
yeah.
But remember, Solomon is coming from the place of no mind, yeah? Sort of like in the legend of Solomon, that Sheba is in fact half Djinn, half human, and the Djinn send him there, that send Sheba there to completely destroy his life. And although he loves her, he lets her go, and of course, it doesn't work. Yeah. He's madly, can you imagine being madly passionate, involved with somebody, and then they just go? I mean, how are you going to be? You're going to be pretty wrecked, especially if you've had a child with them, which you did, but she just went, yeah? However, Solomon is the same, and really, in my opinion, that is the crux of the story. He is still that. He is still in control. There is no emotion there. There is no negativity. There is no positivity. There is just that power of being. And I think that's very, very important,
Yeah. And I think that is a great kind of place to leave this episode. So, I want to thank you so much for your time. And I know we did have like a lot of scheduling conflicts and technical issues and everything. So, thank you for being patient with that. And
no, not at all. Not at all. It's brilliant. I expected it.
Yeah. And the time difference was a motherfucker too. So thank you, for dealing with that. But I've loved this conversation and all the information that you bring. And I'm wondering if you would like to give out some links and stuff to promote your work or your social media stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really useless at this. The magazine that I'm in is New Dawn magazine. There is a website for New Dawn where you can get the article. The article is a little bit more than what we spoke about tonight. But if somebody is interested in working in magic, I suggest they read it.
Yeah, and that magazine, I'd never heard of it before, but as I was looking at the website, I'm like, oh my God, the people that listen to my show would love this magazine. Like, that we tackle a lot of the same topics as they do. So it's definitely worthwhile. It's, I think, Australian, right? Is it from Australia?
Yeah, it's from Australia. It's a very small operation for what I can understand. But they are extremely pernickety as to what they publish, and I think that's really good. Like yourself, I mean, I don't want to blow smoke, but I've loved the people that you've had on, and I really like the way that you do the show as well. Which is
well, thank you.
It's really professional and it's really good. I didn't tell you, but I used to be in television, so I know what I'm looking for. And it's a good show, and I really hope you get 5 times more the success. Seriously.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Brian. And so check out the magazine. Check out Brian's article on there. And do you have anything else that you want to kind of talk about before we take off?
No, I just want to say, just everybody, if you like what I've said about the no mind, really, that is the crux to working magically. This is something that they won't tell you. The moment you are delving into desire, you're into a world that isn't magic anymore.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about at the very beginning of the episode about being in the middle pillar. It kind of loops all the way around just like that. Yeah,
it's good. It's good. But this is my path. Whatever your path is, that's great. Whatever somebody else's path, that is great. But I think if you want to be a full human being, you can't be myopic. You have to look at absolutely everything, And, if you look at all the great gods, for example, they also have this sort of like holistic outlook. If we look at Shiva, for example, even if we say look at Odin, they still all have this amazing holistic outlook,
Yeah.
And I think that's something to learn from.
Yeah. Odin literally has one eye looking outward and one eye looking inward,
Exactly,
he's seeing everything. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. All right. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being on, and hopefully we can get together again soon and talk about some more weird shit.
Okay. Well, I'm working on my next article, which is, last time I was in India, I took something which put me into a non-living state briefly under the guidance of a guru, and so essentially I actually died for a few moments, and
a near-death experience.
Yeah, I'm writing about that. What actually happens when you die? Yeah, it's quite interesting.
I'm fascinated. All right, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So,
all right, it's John. Hey, swing on over to subscribestar.com/Abercast. You can find like 14 exclusive episodes over there, but along with a whole bunch of other good stuff. We have one tier right now. It's the fellow, I guess, or the apprentice. I can't remember what it is. It's $3 tier. You get access to everything that is up there currently right now. So go on over and support the show. Don't forget to go to Abercast.com. You can find our social media links there. You could sign into the mailing list. When you sign into the mailing list, you get graphic elements. You get a link to graphic elements that have to do with the show. So worksheets, notes, graphic elements. We have an episode of the Kabbalah coming up this month, so you can find all like the Tree of Life map and the different the 3 different triangles that we're talking about, the lightning bolt path through the different Sephiroths. All that stuff is there. While you're there, please check on some comic books or graphic novels. Also, we're trying a new thing. We have a shop opened up at Abercast.com. I have a couple of vessels of the art left over from the giveaways last month, and some people reached out to me and asked me about, they were like, fuck the giveaways, can I just buy one? So yes, now you can. If that was a question that you had, just stop on over at the shop. I have a few on hand, and I have an order in for more, so go ahead and act now. I don't know how long we're going to keep doing it. So that's it. Check out the Facebook page. It's super easy to find. It's just the Abercast or Abercast. And also,
if you spend a lot of time on YouTube, you might want to check out our YouTube channel. That, and just a quick reminder, the American Sermon, which is a spin-off podcast, is becoming the Sermon of the Wolf. We're doing a 6-part deep dive into werewolfism. So if you weren't interested in American bullshit, but you might be interested in werewolf bullshit, just go ahead and find it. Most places that good podcasts can be found. We're still working on Spotify and those sorts of places, but it's on iTunes and Stitcher and all the different apps and all that stuff. So thanks.